Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Hall of Famers at Springfield College podcast. Today, Harper Neven and I, Lucas Van Deventer, will sit down to talk with the talented and successful Springfield College field hockey coach and Hall of Famer, Dottie Potter Zenaty.
Her time at Springfield College, Dottie Zenaty played 4 sports: field hockey, tennis, basketball, and softball. Dottie was a part of the inaugural teams in all 4 sports and was a pioneer in women's sports here at Springfield College. Dottie, thank you very much for joining us today, and how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, and it's a pleasure to meet the two of you. I should be in maroon, but I have to tell you, I'm not maroon, but I do have my beanie. Okay, so if you haven't saved your beanie, you've made a mistake. You need it for your reunions, but I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and that was very cool that you still had that. But let's start it off by, so you're the coach, you're a field hockey coach here at Springfield College for quite a while. And so what was your reaction when you first heard about that, and when you first knew you were getting the job, and just how was your experience over the years? So just talk to us a little bit about that.
Okay, well, needless to say, I am thrilled when I was asked to come to Springfield as a faculty member and a coach. I graduated from Springfield bleeding maroon. I just loved my 4-year experience. I didn't believe it was time to leave and get into my profession, as Harper, you are going to be doing. And I did get hired at a high school, Holliston High School, and I was coaching field hockey, basketball, softball, and of course I had to put on a gymnastics show because I graduated from Springfield. They did not have a gymnastics team, so these kids came out of my PE classes, and I did that for 3 years. I then traveled to Colorado to get my master's degree, and Westfield State hired me the next year. Westfield State, right up the road. And in November of that year, Springfield College called me and asked if I would be interested in being a faculty member and coach at Springfield College starting the next fall. And needless to say, my dream came true, and I spent my next 34 years there. So that was my reaction. That was my time frame of getting the job at Springfield.
Yeah, now I'd just like to ask you, what did Springfield College have to offer you, and what initially drew you to Springfield College?
Okay, in my high school, I graduated from Foxborough High School. You probably only know the Patriots played there, but there was a horse racing in that particular area. But the male physical education teacher and coach of male sports at Foxborough graduated from Springfield. So he kept encouraging me early on in my starting of high school about Springfield. And then one of my classmates in high school, her sister was a student at Springfield. So I came to visit, I think my junior year, and I kind of fell in love and said, this is where I would like to go. And that's the short end of it, because your next question, here I am in the Hall of Fame. I got to tell you, I didn't know that Springfield College did not have athletics for women. And I came out of a high school where I started playing varsity sports as a 7th grader. And we only had 3 sports for girls. It was field hockey, basketball, and softball. But we had everything, the uniforms, the travel, the conference. And to get to Springfield, as you can tell, we weren't recruited. There was nothing, which was a shock to me. So all we could do at Springfield for 2 years was sign up on a bulletin board if you wanted to go to UMass and play basketball, or you wanted to go to UMass or UConn and play field hockey. There was nothing organized. So I think that's going to come into your next questions as to how I was part of really history of nothing at Springfield College for women intercollegiately to where we are right now. And I actually lived through almost all of those years myself, either as a student or as the faculty member at Springfield.
That's awesome.
Definitely. Tell us more about just how you went from playing varsity sports in high school to going to a college that didn't have varsity athletics for women. And then at your time there, you were part of the inaugural teams of 4 sports, and just how that process all occurred and how difficult was all that to get started. Just tell us more about that.
Right. Well, the other shock to me was that many of my classmates at Springfield College, especially the ones that came out of New York and Long Island, they never had interscholastic athletics. They had intramurals, but they didn't have. So I didn't know how lucky I was in high school. So anyway, we all got along freshman, sophomore year. We did dabble a little bit. We went to Smith College on weekends to compete in field hockey with people that were out of college and in college, and it was very competitive, part of the US program. And then as we were going to become juniors, our mentors, my mentors, Diane Potter, you probably know the name, we had the same maiden name, but we were not related. Diane Potter, Joan Bush, they pushed Springfield to allow the women to compete intercollegiately, and they were our first coaches. So, fall came around, played field hockey, winter came around, tried out, played basketball. In the spring, I did compete in softball and tennis at the same time. But what you've got to understand is we didn't have a huge schedule. We did practice every day, but we didn't have huge schedules for any of those sports. But Diane Potter made sure that there was not a tennis match on the same day that there was a softball game, because I wasn't the only one that played both those sports. So that's where it started. And we had to find places to practice. The women, the first year in basketball, we played in Jug Gym, which we played in the East Gym, the one when you were right in the front door. That's where we competed. We could not go down to the field house where they have the floor that got laid down, like the Celtics used to lay down the floor. We'd have to put our foot against the wall for an out of bounds ball, put in an out of bounds ball, because the wall was the sideline. We did field hockey out on the baseball field. Softball was where Cheney Hall is. So there were no diamonds made. You made your own diamond. We didn't have uniforms. We participated in all those sports in our physical education uniforms, which you won't even know what they are, but they were called tunics, almost like little dresses with bloomers underneath them. I'm really aging myself. And just to tell you, in basketball, we were so thrilled. The first year, it was just the gray tunic, no number, no anything. Second year, we got these chenille numbers, sewed snaps on our tunics so we could snap the number on when we were competing. And we thought that was great stuff, but there was no budget, there was no travel. So again, and it was still wonderful for us. I lived through all that and saw the progression of what took place, not only at Springfield College, but really throughout the country in the growth of women's sports.
Yeah. So my question, you mentioned that you played 4 sports in college. So my question about that is, how did you manage your time playing 4 sports and being a 4-sport athlete?
Right. And that's interesting, but I'll jump back to something I already said. We didn't have a lot of competitions. I mean, when I ended up coaching, we were playing 20 plus games a season, going into postseason play, regionals, hoping to go to nationals, that kind of thing. Well, I can't even remember how many games we had, but it was probably 6 or 7, that kind of thing. I guess my comment to this is I'm going to throw out my philosophy when I was a coach and what I would tell the parents of prospective students about being an athlete or being involved in anything else. It could be debate team, it could be music, whatever. The parents are always concerned about time. How is my child going to handle sports and handle academics and be a good student? And my philosophy, and I'm a true believer, maybe because it is me, I would tell the parents and this was true for my 34 years because I tracked the grades of my players. My players would do better in season than out of season. And my philosophy is when you're busy, you will get things done. When you're not busy, I can write that paper tomorrow. I can study for that test next week. And I don't know what your philosophy is, but that's how I would look at that. Reflecting back, and I wasn't the top student by any means, but I think we were just so excited to have this intercollegiate experience, to be coached, to go to other college campuses. It just blended in. And again, we were busy, but when you're busy, you get work done. And to this day, I'm the same way. I'm more of a last minute, and you shouldn't be. If I had to do it 3 days ago, it would have been done 3 days ago. So that would be my response, Lucas, to that.
I couldn't agree more on that philosophy. When your back's up against the wall and you have to get it done, you will.
That's right.
But when you got a bunch of time, you don't have
Yeah.
no pressure to get it done. So
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. Shifting to your coaching days, did you always know that when you're in college, when you're in high school, were you always like, I want to coach when I'm older? Or how did that come to be exactly?
I just love activity, even at the age I'm in right now. I just, as I said, I started competing in 7th grade, and I just loved it. And so I think when I was getting to my latter years of high school, it was to either be a secretary or be a physical education teacher. There were two things. I didn't like to talk on the telephone. That would be a secretary, but I also didn't like to get up in front of people. So that would eliminate physical education teacher. But I grew into that. And I did know that I just love sport. I love teaching, because I do consider coaching teaching. So, it's just an elite part of a physical education class, and then you've got the elite of a coaching situation. You're a little more cream of the crop. So I loved it all, and that's what I've done.
So yeah, this next question is directed more towards the motto that you lived by during your time at Springfield College. You talked a lot about fighting through adversity during your time at Springfield College. So what kind of impact do you think that left on your players and your team?
Okay, I'm going to handle that question a little differently, more, not so much the effect on my players and team, because I don't think they know what you're going through, what happened previous to their time, what happened post to their time, the growth, where I'd almost like to give a little history of the changes. To give an example, I already said when I was the athlete, basically we had nothing, no uniforms or anything. Now I came back to Springfield 5 years later. Now we had more teams. They had uniforms, not equal to the men. We were working on it, probably still working on it. But we didn't have an athletic director. The athletic director really didn't want to be the athletic director of men and women. So they hired Diane Potter as part of her load to be the assistant AD for the women. Okay, so she was putting together the schedules for the women. But when I came back in 70, we now have added more teams. We've added varsity and JV, which was a godsend for me. And that'll come into, I think, another question. Because I had to build the talent, the potential was there, but I had to build the talent to compete in Division I, because that's what we competed in, was Division I, not Division II, which Springfield College was Division II at the time. But just to see the difference in those 5 years of getting equal practice spaces, that the women wouldn't always have to practice at 8 o'clock at night. It would rotate with the men. For me, going down to the turf, I'm talking latter years now, Mike DeLong, he was just so wonderful about this. He'd be outside the fence with his football team waiting for me to get off the turf for his practice, or vice versa. We're outside the fence waiting for his team to get off. And inevitably he'd come over to me and say, Dottie, we're not going to use that far end. Why don't you go ahead down there if you want to do a few things? He was so considerate, rather than this is my time and my time only. So I watched that growth. I watched the budget develop, the ability to get grad students to assist the coaches. We had to catch up to where the men were. So, you know, I guess my big thing, not only did I coach and teach, but I had so many more other opportunities to expose my players to different things. And I don't know if this would be the time for this, but I'm going to jump to this. We hosted, you probably don't know this, but we were one of, I think, only 3 colleges and universities in the entire country who had an artificial field. Okay, so in the early 70s, we got one of the first artificial fields. In fact, I had opponents that didn't want to play us because we were not on grass. They were afraid they'd get hurt. So we actually hosted international field hockey matches because we were one of the only teams. I don't know if you know this, but the college was Division II. Field hockey program was Division I. Now, in the early 70s, there were no conferences, no leagues, no postseason play. There was nothing early on. So we got a turf. We did host some international tournaments. What happened in that early 70s, as you know, the men had the Ncaa. That's the big thing right now for men and women. But back when, there was nothing for women. So the women on their own, and these are the people that I'd call the pioneers, and Diane Potter was part of this. They were the ones that they wanted to get organized so the women college players could compete in regional tournaments, could compete in national tournaments. They didn't have the money to send them. The colleges had to pay for that. So to give you an example, in the mid 70s, we win the regional championship, EAIW championship. We win. We're supposed to go to the Pacific Northwest to play in the national championship, and Springfield College doesn't have the money to send us. So the team we beat, University of Massachusetts, they go in our place. These were the heartbreaking things that took place. In 1980, the men took over this AIAW, and women were not happy about this, but they saw that the women were starting to develop and they wanted more. So they wanted to be part of it. And I'll kind of stop after this and tie into some other questions you have. But I actually was invited to be on that very first NCAA field hockey committee. And some of my colleagues were very upset that I accepted it. But my comment to them was, this is inevitable. This is going to happen. So I would rather be on the inside and hopefully help to not make some of the mistakes men had made early on in their NCAA experiences, rather than look at it from the outside. And I ended up being there for a number of years because I turned into the chairmanship as well of the committee. But again, this is all history of how women's sports changed. And just to let you know, in the 70s, before the NCAA, we did start dividing schools and colleges into divisions. Springfield was Division II. There was no good field hockey Division II that we could play. So I wanted to play Division I. I wanted to play the best teams possible, even though we might not win. As long as we were competitive, I'd rather, this is my philosophy, it may be wrong, I'd rather lose a competitive game than blow somebody away and not have any competition whatsoever. So we competed Division I. But what happened as you got in the late 70s and then got into the NCAA, so now they're giving scholarships, we were the smallest school in Division I, the only school in Division I that did not give athletic scholarships. So in order for my team, we never made Division I NCAA final championship round, but we hosted a number of Division I championships, again, so my players could be exposed to that level, to the whole sphere. And that's what happened when we hosted international tournaments. We hosted the NCAA Division I championships, and I was able, which I'll come into later, to give my players so many other experiences. But the one thing I regret, because we did eventually go to Division III, when Springfield College went Division III, we were never in a conference because Division I wouldn't take us. So we were independent. When we did go Division III, it was the first time we were in a conference. We did, of course, win regional championships. We did go to NCAAs. It's the first time we had an overnight in my career. We're talking late 90s, and I retired in 04. It's the first time we had overnights. In Division I, we drove 13 hours to go to Old Dominion, but we slept on the floor. We did have overnights, but we weren't in a hotel. So I just saw the change, and my regret is I may have prevented my players from having the wonderful NCAA experiences that we did when we were Division III. We could have done that earlier on. And I guess I'll throw this out because it was our men's lacrosse team that really got me to change. Our men's lacrosse was Division III, even when our school was Division II. And they qualified for the NCAA tournament. And UMass, who was Division I, qualified for the NCAA tournament. And I saw how excited Keith's team was to be in the NCAAs. They could care less what UMass was doing. And I thought to myself, I'm denying my players, because we could have qualified a lot. I'm denying my players that opportunity. So I'm not sure. You flip a coin. I still wanted to play against the best teams in the country. And they would fly in from Berkeley, California, Northwestern University, University of Virginia. They'd fly in to play us and to play other teams on our field. So we did have a wonderful experience with that. But I got carried away. Sorry.
All good. All good.
Give you a little history.
Yeah.
It's interesting hearing how you lived through so many, or you played and coached through these different eras. You finished your career in the Division III era, but way before that, you were facing D1 teams, and you were the only team at Springfield doing so.
Yeah.
So I kind of have a loaded question next, which is, what is the best game you ever either played or coached while at Springfield? And this can be any time, or you can give us multiple.
That's the question I thought, I can't answer it. For me personally, I don't have a clue. And honestly, as a team, I was just so fortunate to have such wonderful kids. I think probably when we upset UConn when they were up at national championship levels and we beat them. But I am not good about reflecting back on a particular game. And, some people can tell you exactly what happened and all. I think it's a totality of just the experience. And you know what, I'm going to go into this next thing that could have tailed in before I'm hoping the experiences that I was able to give my players help them grow beyond just them being an athlete, being a student athlete, but much more to that. And they always just represented Springfield so much. But one thing, throughout my 34 years, I also officiated high school and college field hockey. So I was in connection with people I'm coaching against and people that I'm coaching in the US program and all of that, because I was coaching in the US program. And that's the other thing, coaching in that program. Also, some of my players were in that program. And you may not even know what this is, but way back, starting in 1980, I believe, the United States this was for all sports, cycling, boxing. Patrick Ewing was a high school player in basketball when I first saw him. We had what was called the Olympic Sports Festival. And that took place the 3 years other than the Olympic year. And every sport had 4 teams, north, south, east, and west. and you traveled to different parts of the country, everybody, you had an opening ceremonies, you were in like an Olympic village, you were totally outfitted in your clothing, you got your free flights to get there. This is coaches, students, etc. And a number of my elite athletes were able to take part in that. They competed in Syracuse, New York, some in Houston, Texas, in the Carolinas, in Indianapolis. So that opportunity for them was just marvelous. On a side note, a totally different experience for them. My husband and I owned and operated field hockey camp that took place at Springfield College. We ran 3 weeks of camp. Each week had over 250 junior high to high school players. Now, I brought in the best high school coaches, college coaches, and international coaches that I could hire to coach these kids. But my own players were able to be hired as assistants to all these head coaches. And of course, they took on responsibilities in the dormitories and that kind of thing. So there was another opportunity if they had those 3 weeks of the summer off to do that. The other thing, I took 8 of my Springfield College field hockey team. So 8 years, you could only go, I think you could go 1 year and you couldn't go again for 3 more years. So we couldn't start this till the 1980s as well. I took 8 of my teams overseas. 7 of those teams went to Europe. I think we took 3 trips to Holland and 1 combined France. We went to Ireland, we went to England. The 8th one, we did go to Barbados. And when I say Barbados, it sounds more like we went on vacation for spring break, but that wasn't it. We were in a tournament. But again, to be in another country, for us to bring our knowledge of America, for my students to learn the culture of the country that we were in, I just felt that the players were just getting such exposure above and beyond them playing on the field. So to say, what's the best game? What was the best? I could probably give you disappointments more than anything else. To lose the national championship by 1 goal and that kind of thing. But I just feel Springfield College is just able to offer so much. And I was, as a faculty coach, I was able to offer even more extended beyond Springfield College to our student athletes.
Yeah. So this next question may be a difficult one to answer. But what would you say your favorite memory was at Springfield College?
Okay, I'm not going to do favorite memory. I'm going to do more unique, kind of two things that are unique and really nothing to do with on the field. And by the way, I was the assistant basketball coach for a number of years and also became head coach and told the athletic director, it's time for you to find somebody else because I can't do both field hockey and basketball and work in the US program as well. But my story to show you what a wonderful reputation Springfield College has above and beyond the immediate area. In fact, I think we're more well-known internationally and outside of our immediate area. But I ended up having a student athlete who actually came from England. But to start the story, she wanted to come to the United States, major in physical education at a college or university. She never heard of Springfield College. So she's getting catalogs from different colleges and universities. She told me this story after she became a student. And she said every catalog she got into, it would list faculty and where the faculty graduated from. And she kept seeing that this number of faculty at each college and university graduated from Springfield College. So she said to somebody, where is Springfield College and what is it? And she ended up coming to Springfield College. So I thought that was unique. And then as I'm approaching my retirement, or thinking about it, when you sit interviewing a prospective student and their parents, and the mother of that prospective student is one of your past players, you know that maybe you've been around too long because you've coached the mother, and now you're probably going to be coaching the daughter. actually very special experiences. And that did happen a few times, that the child is coming to the same place. So that would be kind of my unique. I guess maybe one of our tournaments where I'm in a grocery basket and people are wheeling me around the grocery store might be a unique experience as well. But we had some wonderful, wonderful times.
That's very interesting. Again, the eras, how they overlap and how you coach a mother and daughter. That's just such a unique memory that you hold. It's very interesting to hear about. And going to the end of your career, you had some really good teams. As you just mentioned, you went to the national championship game. Unfortunately, did lose by 1 goal, but you did have some of the best teams in Springfield history. So was that because of all the experience you gained? Was it because the level of competition, or why was that, you think, that you?
Okay, I think I'll jump back to some things I said before. First of all, in the 70s, when we really had not much of anything, that's where we produced an Olympian, and the 1996 Olympic coach came out of the 70s. And we had some outstanding teams. In fact, at the time, when I first started coaching in the early 70s there, we wouldn't even play the University of Connecticut because they just didn't have much ability. Well, the University of Connecticut has won something like 8 national championships. I mean, they are an icon of field hockey. But we did have very good teams. But what happened in Division I, and we could hold our own. I didn't want to have my players be embarrassed or anything like that. But what happened at the end of the time with Division I, so many of these teams were getting their key players from Europe. They were getting them from out of the country. And just to give you an example, one team had, I don't know how much you know, but I can give a comparison to soccer. On a corner kick, let's say, this particular skill in hockey, it's called the corner hit. Someone hits the ball in, there's a circle. Someone's up on top that stops the ball, and someone drives the ball. This one team, all 3 of those players were from Holland, okay? They scored 40-something goals just on corners with those 3 people hitting the ball. And actually, that particular team, when they came to play us, we took the lead 1-0. We did lose 3-2. The coach was furious. That coach ended up being the national coach, and I ended up being her assistant at one point. So that was kind of ironic. But it was just getting harder and harder to compete against these ready-made athletes, elite athletes, where I got my handful of elite athletes that came in with that skill already. But we really depended on our JV program because we had an awful lot of potential, but we had to help them develop that potential to a Division I level. And that was a challenge that I loved. And I think my assistant coaches loved that, and the players themselves, to see what they could do, how high a level they could reach. So there are no longer JV sports at Springfield for many, many reasons. Mostly other teams dropped them. We couldn't find competition for our junior varsity teams. We had it up until I retired, so I didn't know any different. But and then I probably made a mistake. We did go Division III. I couldn't cut the umbilical cord quite 100%, so I kept some Division I schools, and I had the selection committee for the Ncaa tournament talked to me one day, and they said, "Dottie, you killed us. We couldn't choose Springfield because I think we lost to those 2 Division I teams by 1 goal." She said, "We knew you were one of the strongest teams, but because you had those Division I's on your schedule, we couldn't do it." So anyway, we get to Division III, and yes, we did well. When we got in a conference, we had never been in a conference. What a thrill to have a conference championship. We never had a championship. The season ended, and the season ended. That's it. Your last game, there's no place to go for all those years. And it was a thrill. And this is where I say I may have shortchanged my players early on, but they still had a marvelous experience playing those Division I schools. But But yes, we had our conference championships, and that near the latter part, because it wasn't that many years that we were in Division III. You actually, if you won that, you got an automatic berth to the NCAA championships. And I don't know if you understand, but the NCAA pays for everything. So, I mean, that's just a thrill. And then to qualify for the finals, one, we came in one, we're up one, we were in the Final Four. So it was a thrill. I would love to have kept going. And the rules of field hockey also changed. And the year after I got out, man, would I have loved some of those rules, because it would have made it much easier for the players to be successful. But all along, those 34 years were just unbelievable. And I hope the players all feel they had a worthwhile and gracious experience. And I know some of them, they have friendships on Facebook now. Of course, I see my past players with their kids who are now playing in high school or whatever. And these are some of my latter ones that were younger. And I'm still in touch with so many of the players. And even for myself, and I'll say it to you folks, you know, some of my best friends are my college friends from Springfield College. And we're talking over 55 years, all from Springfield. It's Springfield is a very unique place.
Yeah. So you touched on it a little bit. My next question is more about after Springfield and your time in your life after college.
Right.
So my next question is, how did Springfield prepare you for life after college?
You know, I think Springfield I always said we get the greatest students. We get people persons come to Springfield. They got to be working with people. If they want to be an accountant, they want to be an accountant with people, not in a back room punching buttons. And I guess just to be with people and be mentored by people, hopefully you're giving. I always say I received more from my students than I'm certain I ever gave to them. But it's really that humanics philosophy that you hear about, giving back, and you know, spirit, mind, and body. There's a little triangle that's on my head. I told you I bleed maroon. Now, not 100% of the students are going to do that, but I tell you, it is amazing. And one of the first questions you asked, how I even heard about Springfield, and I told you, you know, high school male physical education teacher. I say a very high percentage of Springfield College students were influenced, whether it be in the Y, whether it be in the Boys and Girls Club, whether it be in church. They were influenced by someone from Springfield College who was so wonderful that the college just draws them. And I think it takes a while for a student, because it's very expensive for you folks to go to school. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how your parents do it. Very expensive. And I think it takes a while for you to realize, wow, what an education I got, and what a reputation here, this tiny little school. But you go somewhere in the future, you go out west, or you go to California and you put on a Springfield College shirt, I guarantee you there will be someone from Springfield College who's going to come up to you. You'd think you came from this huge university that's so well known. And I don't know, Springfield's just, I say hello to everybody to this day. I know you're not supposed to when you're in the city, you know, you're not supposed to eye them and say hello, but there's something very special about Springfield. And I think the faculty, I've been gone a long time now, but the relationship that students have with faculty, I would get, this is kind of a cute story. All of my assistant coaches were always grad students, nothing full-time, okay? And I can't tell you how many of these grad students, they loved where they went to school. Many of them large universities. And I can't tell you how many of them would say to me, my God, Dottie, I went over to the BC, that was the snack bar. I went over to the BC and got a cup of coffee. two faculty members came up to me, or a faculty member asked me if I wanted to go for a cup of coffee. She said, I went through 4 years of college, university. She said, I'm not sure one faculty member knew my name, even knew my name. It was amazing how many undergrads have said that. I got one grad student, she actually was from UMass, and she loved it because her coach was one of my players. But she always wanted to go to Springfield. Her parents couldn't afford it. So she became a grad student and came and just said, I just had to get a degree from Springfield College because I knew that was the place to be. So actually, she went on one of our trips, and a couple of my kids were sick. You play, you practice, and you play, and you do other things internationally. You mix in with all the families and everything, but we needed another player. And I said, how about putting on a uniform? She said, I always wanted to put on a maroon and white uniform. I said, how about putting on a uniform and playing? She was so thrilled, just so thrilled. But just again, to show you the reputation that Springfield has, grad students are floored by the friendliness, I guess, just the friendliness and the caring of the faculty and even administrators throughout the college. And you certainly have a marvelous president of the college who must be going through, you know what, these last full year plus.
Springfield is certainly a very unique and special place, as you mentioned. I can second if I'm wearing a t-shirt or a sweatshirt in even my hometown, just 2 hours away, or really anywhere in New England, it's someone's son or someone's daughter or someone's nephew goes to Springfield. It's just,
yes,
it always seems to be a connection there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But you really provide a lot of opportunity to your players, which is what I kind of want to touch on next, to where back in the 60s when you were at school, to where 1970 you started coaching all the way to 2003. And how do you see the development of women's sports and the opportunities that grew along the way, and even to this day? So if you just want to touch on that a little bit.
Right. I mean, the advancements are unbelievable, and you all know about Title IX and all that kind of thing, that to try to be equal. And I got to say, Springfield had to catch up because we had nothing. Most colleges had nothing, or they were very unequal to the men. So we've seen that growth. But I have to tell you, just today, watching the news, you know that we're into the Ncaa basketball championships, men and women. There's already a controversy. The men, where they're being housed in their city, I think they're in Indianapolis, I'm not sure. They've got these beautiful strength training areas and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The women do not. The women's accommodations are not the same as men, and they want equal. You're going to do this, then do it for me. So I've seen that. I've seen the improvements, but I've also seen the bad side of when we get up into the NCAAs. I'm going to use women's basketball because it's the most out in the open to everybody. All of a sudden, these athletes, some of them just snotty little whatevers, going, almost telling the coach what to do because I've been recruited and I'm a big shot. And that's not what it's all about. I can remember when I took a team to, I don't know if it was Canada or Holland or whatever. And it was under 18 team or under 21. So there were college kids, and there were, I don't think they were out of college. So these had to be college age kids. And I made it clear right away, when we finish practice, we all pick up the hockey balls. We finish, if we have a pizza in here or whatever, the coaches aren't picking up your trash. You're going to be doing, this is all part of it. You don't become elite in a negative way. And when they'd go to camps, let's say I took some college kids and now they got to go back to their college campuses, and I'd try to talk to them about, now look, you're going back. You may even know some things your coach doesn't know, but you need to not act pompous about what you've just been through, but you need to help your teammates, maybe become more skilled, talk privately with the coach that maybe should like to try something, use it as an educational thing, not as a big shot types. That was very important to me. It was probably more important with my players on the field that they looked neat and respected the opponent and the officials. That was probably more important to me than how they played. If they knocked someone down, I wanted them to help pick that person up, not go score a goal and then come back and pick them, which is probably wrong. Score the goal and then come back and pick her up. But all of that was very, very important to me as a coach.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned the controversy that's going on right now about the NCAA tournaments and the facilities that between the men and women, because I think that it's definitely a big issue that's still happening now, even though like it definitely needs to be addressed. So it's definitely great that you were touching on that, and but it was a great time talking with you, and it was.
Well, I hope I didn't go. I did. I went long. I'm sorry if I went too long. You'll have to edit. And I'd just like to say at the end, first of all, I'm pleased to meet you folks. I wish you the very best.